Hey guys and girls, John Kelly. Welcome back, law enforcement life coach with your Sometimes Heroes Need Help podcast. I am sitting down with Paige Arnone. And you say, Paige Arnone. Yes, that Paige Arnone, Firstgevity, yoga instructor for the first responder community. She is doing some amazing things in this space. When we say yoga, I can see you right now rolling your eyes. Knock it off, right? Pay attention to the road. You're driving. We're going to talk all things yoga, and not only we're going to put some functional, workable definitions to what the hell this thing is and how it adds value to your life, how it makes you a better version of you. And there's a lot of misconceptions out there. There's a lot of eye rolling because nobody knows. And so we're going to do a deep dive with Paige today, and she's going to get us on board with the who, what, when, wheres, and whys of yoga. And I can't think of anyone better to do it than Paige. So Paige, it is so awesome to see you again. Thanks for taking the time.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it so much.
Yeah, so we connected through a mutual friend, Pat Fitzgibbons. And
Love him.
Pat, yeah, he's a good egg, man. Pat and I talk every week. And there's always we had a little talk a week ago, and we were talking about different things that guys can be doing for their own physical, mental health. And we're like, yeah, you got to give our girl Paige a call, man. Ring her up. She's dialed in on all things. And
here I am.
Here you are. So this is what we're doing. We historically, typically in the first responder community, we don't do a good job of taking care of ourselves. And everybody's got the job, and call bullshit on all that, right? It's about being present. It's about being intentional. And there are some difficulties in getting people to take you would think, like, why is it so hard to get somebody to start doing something to take care of themselves? And so yoga is one of those, I think it's like a sleeper. It's everybody's like, you need to run, you need to lift weights, you need to go to CrossFit. And then somewhere out in that space, yoga exists. But I think that might be a really good place to start for people. But that they can only do that if they know what the hell it is, and and what the real benefit is for them to do that. And I got to tell you, I'm kind of naive as well. I know I don't know Paige. So help me out. What the hell is all this about? And then I want you to tell me how you incorporate it in for agencies, because you're working with police departments all around the country. And I think that's awesome. So I'm listening, and I want to know more about yoga and why I should care.
So first, I want to start by saying that I've been doing this. I've been teaching law enforcement for almost 6 years.
Right.
And by this point, I've heard it all. And there definitely is a perception still that exists today. It's not as prevalent or prominent as it was 6 years ago, but there's still this idea that yoga is feminine or woo-woo, or cops don't do yoga. And so, we talked about this a little bit, but I think education and knowledge and kind of diving into what it is and how you do it and how you can incorporate that into your life as a first responder, as in law enforcement, I think is important. And I also want to say that, I'm not here to say don't do CrossFit or don't run or don't do HIIT. I think that those are all viable resources and tools for your fitness regimen. But yoga could be a good addition to that. And we always
supplementing what we're already doing.
Yep. And so I work out, and I do HIIT, and I work out with a personal trainer, and I lift, and I do all those things too. So I'm not all yoga all the time. But yoga is a really valuable resource, not just physically, but also mentally and emotionally. And so, those are kind of the three buckets I like to talk about a lot is, we have physical, we also have mental and emotional benefits to the yoga practice. And so when we talk about yoga, I think that, like I said before, we have this idea that it's woo-woo and someone's going to come in here and start chanting and, doing some.
Is there incense? Is there any incense involved?
I do not bring sage or incense
All
or
right, just
sound bowls.
okay,
I
cool.
think that to teach yoga for law enforcement or for first responders, it requires a modern approach. And so, how can we address this in a way that is received? And the way that we do that is a very straightforward, direct approach to the yoga practice, which I have found to be, more well received. And,
Right.
you know, I think people are more receptive to that. Um,
Yeah, I think cops have a way of sniffing out bullshit, and it's like, oh, what we got to do that, I kind of like cut to the chase. Hey, this is the nuts and bolts of it. This is why it's important. This is what we're gonna do. Yeah.
Yeah, so if we're going to dive down into kind of the benefits, I do like to start with the physical, even though I think that the mental and emotional aspects of it are really kind of the bread and butter. That's, the part
Right.
that we're trying to get to. I think that when you have a perception that something is not for you, for whatever reason it is, starting with the physical is a really great way to start because it's tangible.
Okay, it
And
makes sense.
and we all know the common aches and pains and injuries in this profession. And so at a very base, simple level, if I can get your shoulder feeling better, if I can get your low back feeling better, then your receptiveness to all the other things is going to grow, right?
Yeah,
And
I
so
don't know a first responder that doesn't have a bad back, a sore back, shoulders back,
shoulder
knees.
replacements,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah. And
the
I
whole nine
laugh because I'm
yards.
like, it's your whole body,
Right,
really. Like we can
100%.
just kind of like scan the body.
What hurts? Yeah,
Yeah,
everything.
everything. And so if we can look at it this way and say, okay, let's start there. Let's start at the physical. Let's get your body feeling better. Let's get you feeling more flexible. Let's get you feeling stronger, more stable. Then the mental and emotional pieces can kind of fall into line later. I think that if you start out by sit down and meditate, that could be a really challenging place to start, especially when you start to consider PTSD or trauma and things of that nature. So I always like to start with the physical. Let's just start
Okay.
there. Let's get you feeling better. Let's focus on mobility, flexibility, stability, and then all the other things fall into line. So if we're considering the physical aspects of yoga, the benefits, obviously, the first thing I think that comes to mind when we think of yoga is mobility and flexibility. The first thing that anyone ever says to me is, I'm not flexible, so I can't do yoga. And so,
Did you hear me speak to somebody the other day? Because those,
did
yeah,
you say
that's
that,
me.
those exact
I'm
words?
about as
Mhm.
flexible as a 2x4. Right.
Yep, exactly. And so I think it's really interesting because, you go to the gym to get stronger, you go to yoga to get more flexible. And so I've never heard someone say, I'm not strong, so I'm not going to go to the gym,
Right.
right?
Yeah, it
You're
just
not
doesn't
flexible,
doesn't even.
so
Yeah.
we work on it. It's a practice and it's something that we work on and you develop that over time, just like you develop muscles and strength over time. And so yoga is great in helping improve mobility and flexibility because of the different movement patterns. And so what happens when we only do lifting or running or hit or CrossFit or whatever it is,
Right.
you're contracting your muscles, right? So you have like typical movement patterns when you have those physical exercise. And a lot of it is flexion. And you are shortening your muscles, right? And that's what
Okay.
makes you look stronger, right? And that's what you're kind of looking for, those bulky,
There you go.
shorter.
All right.
Yeah, I'm
Nice.
flexing too. Like, I got
Right.
some guns over
Boom.
here. Yeah, boom.
Gun show.
But the issue that we run into when we only do that is the muscles become immobile. So they're shorter, they're bulkier, and they're less mobile. And so yoga offers different movement patterns like extension, lateral bending, twisting, and rotation. So, and I know that if you're just listening to this audio and can't see my hands, I talk with my
It's all
hands,
right.
but
I'll
I like to
describe.
think of muscles almost like putty or like Laffy Taffy or something, if you will. Like they're meant to move in all directions. And when we only flex, We shorten the muscles and they kind of, become this like bulky ball, if you will. And so yoga is going to help to improve that mobility by offering those different movement patterns. So at a very base level. And then we have different yoga styles that kind of get into the deep connective tissues, the fascia, the ligaments, the joints, and that helps with mobility and flexibility as well. So it's good to have a balance, because what tends to happen, and I'll kind of tie this with a bow and relay this to first responders, or law enforcement specifically. What happens when your body isn't prepared for big movements, right? If your muscles are short and bulky and immobile, and let's say you're working a shift and you're sitting in your car all day, and then all of a sudden you're in an on-foot pursuit, what tends to happen? You start to pull things, tear things, right?
Sure.
We
Yeah.
see that all the time. Or you lose balance and you fall, because your body's not prepared for those movements, and so injuries tend to happen. And so when we can increase mobility and flexibility, we're reducing the chance of injury. And
Okay.
everyone wants to feel, more mobile, but also
Right.
everyone wants to prevent injury. No one wants to get hurt.
Mm.
And then from a department level, the departments themselves want to reduce the cost of injury, and they want to reduce injury in general, because then what happens, the workload and the stress that puts on the rest of the
Sure.
team when someone's out. So at a very base level, mobility and flexibility is a huge benefit to the yoga practice.
When you start talking about movement patterns, um, what would some of those be? What would, because I get the whole, the light bulb clicked on, like, when, if all you do is contract muscles, that, well, that's great. I mean, you look like you're building, right? You're
Buff.
sculpting, and right, but that's not functional. Like, if you're static, great. If you never move, great. Be bulky, but you move, you bend, you twist, whether you want to or not sometimes. And so what are some of those movement patterns like look like to provide us with that increased mobility and flexibility?
Yeah, I mean, you just nailed it. It's everything you just said: twisting, rotation,
Oh, okay.
extension. So those are the movement patterns that you don't typically see in a, CrossFit or HIIT, or running. So, bending laterally. So if you're bending sideways and stretching the side of your body, what other exercise do you know that does that?
Hmm.
Back bending extension. So we're extending the spine. That helps with mobility. Even, forward folding is something that we don't really do unless
What
you're
is
maybe
that? Is that like just like trying to bend your body in half?
hinging at your hips. Everyone says I can't touch my toes,
Okay.
right?
All right. Yeah, yeah.
It's because your hamstrings are shortened.
Oh my God, my hamstrings scream,
Yeah.
scream when and I've been trying to be very deliberate in stretching after every exercise, stretching in between sets, stretching, after I cycle, like all that, because it's just this ball,
Yep.
this ball
Yeah,
of muscle that doesn't want to flex.
exactly. Because the muscles have shortened. And so in order to have stability, you also have to have flexibility.
Mm.
And in order to have flexibility, you have to have stability. So they kind of work hand in hand. And so, the other thing that I think that people don't realize is that if you want to get stronger and you want to build muscle mass, by incorporating something like yoga or some sort of recovery or stretching into your routine, it helps you to build muscle mass quicker. It also helps to aid in recovery. So your muscles recover quicker. So you're building more muscles, your muscles are recovering quicker, and then you're reducing your chance of injury.
All right. So if I'm trying to put some size on, yoga doesn't shrink my muscles.
No, so what
It
it does
repair,
is,
kind of like helps repair them quicker.
yep. So what happens, and we're going to kind of dive a little bit, so hopefully this doesn't get
No.
lost, but with yoga at its core is a breathing exercise. And so we kind of link the two. We have your movement patterns, but then we also have breath regulation, and those two go hand in hand. And that's kind of the core of the yoga practice, is kind of combining breath work with the physical movement. And when we breathe less, because we're regulating our breath, which means we're extending our breath, we're elongating our breath. And so the opposite of that would be hyperventilation, right?
Okay. Okay.
So that's short breath, right? So we're trying to regulate and control and elongate the breath, which allows us to breathe less. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does.
When we breathe less, more oxygen reaches our muscles. When more oxygen reaches our muscles, the muscles recover quicker. And so
wait a minute. So that's counterintuitive though, isn't it? Because
right.
I think that I'm breathing better. I'm getting more oxygen in the more, but I'm not.
You're not. Yeah. Breathing less, breathing slower, longer breaths, more oxygen to the muscles. And then from a physical level, the muscles will recover quicker. It also has a positive impact on your cardiovascular health, because what is your heart? It's a muscle. And so, more oxygen, better cardiovascular health. And so we can kind of like go down rabbit holes and, how this all like connects. And, we kind of talked about this earlier, but the breath also is like breath control regulates the nervous system, reduces cortisol levels, reduces inflammation. So there's, a whole list of benefits.
Yeah, we'll get to that because that's super important, right?
Yeah, but physically, your muscles do become longer, but that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing for the muscles to become longer. They're not going to become smaller per se.
Right.
They're going to become longer, more mobile, and they'll recover quicker if you incorporate yoga or some sort of recovery stretching into your routine.
Excellent. Yeah, that's all right. So that sold me on the physical. It's not, and it makes perfect sense. Listen, we want to become stronger. We don't walk into the gym and go, I'm weak, I can't start working out. That's the reason why you work out, to get stronger. So I'm not flexible. So I'm not going to start. No, the reason to start yoga is to become flexible and have better mobility.
Yeah, and then
one benefit, anyways.
One benefit, exactly. And there's also other benefits, like stability and balance, which are also really important to prevent injury. Like we mentioned before, if you're falling, the chances of you becoming injured are going to be higher. But even if you think about it from a mood and productivity perspective, if your back hurts all day, what is your mood going to look like? How are you going to show up for your job? How are you going to show up for your friends, your family, if you're cranky because you're in constant chronic pain? And so if we can help to alleviate that, then your mood improves and your productivity improves, and then your relationships improve. And so that's kind of like maybe outside the box thinking. And then additionally,
wow. Yeah.
When you think about your job in law enforcement is to protect and serve, right? Your job is to show up for your peers, is to show up for your community. And if physically you can't do your job at a high level because you're injured, because you don't have the ability to do these big movement patterns, you can't run, you can't, then how is that going to impact the way you show up for your peers and for your community? And what are the safety challenges that come with that? So physically, you need to be able to do your job. And so there's so many other things you can kind of like spin off of, but mood, productivity, relationships, the way you show up for yourself, the way you show up for your peers, the way you show up for your community.
Huge. I never thought about it in that regard, Paige. Listen, I've always considered like physical fitness to be a tenet. Like you do. I was an alcoholic, but I was physically fit. I was an addict, but I was physically fit. Like that's the one thing that you can't, because of that contract that you sign, I'm going to be there for my partners, and I'm going to be able to do the job. I'm never going to not be able to do the job because I wasn't physically strong enough. Like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of people that forgot to sign that contract in this profession of ours. And so maybe this is a great way for them to get back to a level of functionality. Like I always say, things don't get messed up overnight, so they don't get fixed overnight. Like if you've
100%.
neglected your physical fitness for time period X, this might be a really good way for you to start regaining some control in that area.
Yep. And I
With
think that the really cool thing about yoga is that it does really encourage a healthier lifestyle. And I think you could say that about a lot of different physical exercises. You know, we have like
Sure.
dopamine and you have the adrenaline and all the things that coincide with physical exercise. And so, you know, it's a really great way to start encouraging a healthier lifestyle physically, but then also, like we mentioned, mentally and emotionally as
Yeah.
well.
And when you said mood, I remember like when I hurt physically, I'm an asshole.
Oh,
I
yeah.
I am I am I and I it's like I gotta catch myself. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm in pain. And like when you're in
Mhm.
pain, you cause pain to the people around you because it's really hard to be yourself, normal, pleasant, upbeat, um, optimistic, right? All those, mindful. If the source of all that, is being kind of undermined by injury,
Yep.
then you're not adding value to your own life. You're detracting, you're taking away, you're not being the best version of you. It sounds kind of corny, but like I can remember like feeling that pain all the time and not being a pleasant person to be around. And so
100%. And I think that's so normal. And, you know, I think that the thing to also note is that we don't have to wait until there's a problem
uh,
to do
yeah,
something. And I think we all do that. Like I'm very guilty of that too. You know, not addressing something until you're in this position of like, I'm in pain and I'm cranky. And now, like, I don't like this version of myself, or now I have to take time off of work or whatever it is. Putting in place proactive measures is so important so that we can help to prevent these things from happening and we can create longevity in our lives. But I think so often we only address a problem when there's a problem. And so
yeah.
if we can start incorporating things now before there's an issue, then we're setting ourselves up for
Paige,
success long term.
like that philosophy is the foundation of what I do when I talk. I talk about life. You know, there's a woman out there. Her name is Olivia Johnson. She was on the job, and she does deep dives like forensic examination of suicide in first responders. And so
Mhm.
she came up with something called the Fatal 10. And they're like the Fatal 10 are things that we need to be paying attention to in life. But her whole point is proactively, like that's how we keep the slide from becoming an avalanche. Like, don't
Yep.
wait. Like, if we know, right, because of the data, you're not unique. I'm not unique. We have the same. Your problems are my problems, and my problems are your problems. So if we can go and get ahead of it, if we know the first responder community has a tendency not to do X, Y, and Z, and that they create huge problems for us over time period X. Uh, why don't we get proactive with it? Why don't we start
Exactly.
now before there's an injury, before there's a problem, before there's a slide? And that's where yoga comes in. It's a gateway into health, physical and mental wellness that doesn't have to be this Herculean effort to right the ship after it's been on its side for the last 10 years.
Yep. Exactly. I love it. I'm 100% on board with
No,
you.
I mean that just like played into like the
Yeah.
whole the whole concept is you taking care of you and knowing that we like to take the path of least resistance. And I'm not saying
Ooh,
that yoga is the path of least resistance, but I think it can be mentally like all in one. Like you can start in this area, and the benefits you're going to receive from it. We already talked about the physical benefits, but it's beyond that. I mean, you started talking about breath work and how that plays into, I mean, this is all happening at the same time. There isn't, we're going to stretch and then in the second half of the class, we're going to breathe. And then, no, this is like all in one, right?
Right.
So let's talk about like that transition now.
So you just got me really excited when you said that we want to take the path.
I have that effect on women, Paige, but
When
that's
you said
very
that
good.
we
Thank
want to
you.
take the path of least resistance, because I
Yeah.
talk about this all the time. Like this is actually something I talk about in my classes all the time. The body wants to take the path of least resistance. So we're talking about physically. The body wants to take the path of least resistance. It wants what's easy, right? You know, it's hard to work out. It's hard to do yoga. It's hard to do these things. And so the body wants to do the path of least resistance and make things easier. And so you start to see like form will be compromised and things of that nature. But then also mentally, the mind wants to take the path of least resistance. And we know this, it's human nature. We want to escape. We want to numb. We want to avoid the things that are challenging. And that's kind of like the natural response of things is the path of least resistance. Yoga takes the path of resistance. You know, you are training your body and your mind to get comfortable with the uncomfortable, to breathe through the discomfort, to you know, develop mental resilience and emotional regulation through these things that are really uncomfortable. And you know, physically, I think everyone can understand this. You know, if you're you know, maybe in a squatted position for a minute, that's really challenging. And
you like people are like, I could do that for a minute.
Do that.
Like,
Okay.
okay.
Hey, listen, I've been teaching law enforcement for almost 6 years, and I can tell you right now that, you know,
What's your experience been?
Maybe 10%
10,
are
right?
going to be doing that.
And you're a rock star up until about 15, 20 seconds. And then everything starts shaking.
And so we use the breath to quiet the mind. And so the body's capable. The body's capable of doing amazing things, far more than the mind can comprehend. You can sit and, you know, if we say like a wall sit or something of that nature, because I know a lot of people don't know the various yoga poses. So that's just something I can kind of, you know, put out there. You know, let's say you're squatting or you're doing, you know, a wall sit for a few minutes. Your body can do that. You're physically able to do that. What tends to happen is the mind wants to come out of it. It's the mind that starts to say, this fucking sucks. This hurts. I can't do it. I want to come out. You know, I'm shaking. This is uncomfortable. So it's the mind that's going crazy and wants to take that path of least resistance and wants to tell you, like, I need to come out. Or sometimes the mind will start to say, like, I'm in danger. You know, I need to come out. And it's like this, almost this fight or flight type of reaction.
Sure.
And so the breath then comes into play as a tool to quiet the mind. So we start to focus on the breath. We focus on the sound of the breath. You focus on the length of your breath. And it really is a practice of mindfulness that quiets the mind, and it creates that mental resilience and that emotional regulation. So you're finding ease in the discomfort. So there's a balance between the two. And so really you're kind of tackling this, you know, like I said, your body and your mind want to come out because it's hard. And so you're kind of tackling this resistance. You're like, okay, I know this is hard, but I'm strong enough to do it physically and mentally. And you're utilizing the tools that you have at your exposure all the time. Your breath, as long as we're alive, your breath is there always. So it doesn't matter if you're doing yoga or if you're handling a stressful situation in your daily life, in your career. Your breath is always that tool that can help to create that mental resilience and that emotional regulation, even when everything else is telling you to come out of it.
Right.
If that makes sense.
No, it does. So back in the day, I would go to Orange Theory, that, you know, a little bit of everything. Right. and they would always have these competitions. And I got into a plank, and I was there for 10 minutes. And I was like, listen, everybody was like, I was the last man standing. I was the last person in the class still on the plank. And I just I I had headphones in, but I was listening. I was just I was like, I was listening to my breathing. And it
Yep,
was just like it was just like I almost like detached myself from the situation. Now listen, a plank for 10 minutes isn't a everything's relative. For me, that was a long time.
that's
Um
tough. That's
and
really tough.
but like I wasn't the fittest person in the class. I was certainly not the youngest. And but I just I kind of incorporated like, all right, let me breathe through this.
Yep,
And I was just like, people were like, how did you do that? I'm like, I don't know. I was like, I don't
it's
know how I
powerful.
did it. And it's just the power of that. Like you can do if you know, like if you know that that's a resource that's available to you because you're doing it right now.
Mhm.
And if you know how to control it, is that where we get some of that? You've heard about like obviously the box breathing, like breathe for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4. Does that play into it as well, Paige? The breath? Or is that something different?
Yeah, so that's a specific breathing exercise.
Okay.
And that helps to encourage, stress reduction, being able to manage anxiety, regulates the nervous system. So all the things that we talked about, really breathing exercises all have similar benefits, and they're really great. Those would be done separately.
Okay.
So you have a way that you would breathe in a yoga class. That's a specific way, and that's typically done in and out through the nose only. So 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out, in and out through the nose, and you do that consistently. That is the typical breath, and there's more specifics to it,
Is
but
that
just at
like
a really base
is that
level.
will the instructor like tell you that this is what we're doing?
Yeah, and if you need to release heat, like if you feel like you're really hot or maybe you're coming into a panic, then you can exhale out of your mouth. We just try to avoid breathing in and out through the mouth because it's more reactive, it's more emotional. And this might be a little out there, but you think about it, what's your natural reactions breathing in and out through the mouth, right? And like that is emotional hyperventilation. That's how you're going to be breathing, is in and out through the mouth. And so by
Seems like
being
your
able
body's out
to,
of control when you're breathing in and out of
Mhm.
your mouth.
Yep, so if you can close your mouth and focus on breathing in and out through the nose in a controlled and regulated way, again, about 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out, and then you can extend that over time, maybe 5 or 6 seconds in and then 5 or 6 seconds out. But starting with 4, then that's going to be less emotional, more controlled. And that's typically the way that you would breathe in a yoga class if we're connecting the movement and the breath together. Breath work, breathing exercises can be standalone exercises. And so, what you described, that box breathing, 4 seconds in, hold at the top for 4, exhale for 4, hold at the bottom, right? And then you would repeat that. It's that box breathing. That is a particular exercise that's done as a standalone.
Okay.
And there
Okay.
are many different breathing exercises that you can do as standalones. And, it just takes practice to know what those are. There's, belly breathing, there's 4-part yoga breathing, there's alternate nostril breathing, there's all kinds of breath
Yeah.
work and breathing exercises that you can do as a standalone exercise. And those are also very powerful. And those also are considered to be a part of the yoga practice.
Okay.
So even though it's not the physical part of it, it's still a piece of the full picture when it comes to the yoga practice.
I got you. So when we're going through the movements, you as an instructor, are you speaking and guiding me through like the movement, not only the movement, but the breathing as well, like at the same time, like what you were
Yes.
expecting me to be doing?
Yes. So
Okay.
every time you're dynamically moving. So every time you're moving in a particular way, there's going to be a particular breath associated with it. So as an example, inhales create lift. So like if you were to lift your arms up, that's when you would inhale. If you were
Okay.
to bring your arms down, that would be an exhale. So always cueing that. And then when we're holding poses, static poses for periods of time, it's that controlled breathing in and out through the nose as
Okay.
you hold a stationary pose. So yes, that's something that is being cued throughout the class, something that you're reminded of a lot throughout the class. And then there's going to be like certain challenging things that you're holding. Usually the stationary poses are going to be the most challenging because like we talked about
Yeah.
before, like if you're sitting in a squat for a minute and you're like forced to breathe, and the whole time you're just in your head thinking that you hate me.
Mm.
I'm cueing that breath and I'm
What is
telling you
wrong
that
with
you're
this
capable.
woman? She's sadistic. Why is she
Yeah.
doing this to me?
It's funny because at the end, like, we do something really hard and it's like, I look at everyone, I'm like, do you still like me? And they all laugh. Like,
Yeah, somewhere
do you hate me now?
there's a dartboard with your name on it, man, and there's just like, but I got to imagine though at the end, just like anything, man, there's an amazing sense of accomplishment.
Yeah, and here's the thing, like I think that, when we talk about, like we said before, when there's this perception that yoga is feminine or woo-woo, and you do a class that kicks your ass and you're like, oh my God, I did not know that yoga was challenging in that way. And I didn't know that I was mentally and physically strong enough to do that. And now I know that I am. It is an accomplishment. And you get out all of the nervous energy, all the anxiety, all the stress that you're holding on to for that period of time. And you're super present in the moment, practicing that mindfulness that is, I know, a huge buzzword in
Sure.
this profession right now. And you come out and you're like, I feel amazing. Like I feel lighter, I feel less stressed, but then you also feel more energized at the same time. It's like this really amazing combination of feeling accomplished, feeling kind of tired, like you
Yeah.
just did something, but then you also feel energized and ready to tackle the rest of the day because you, for the last however long it was, maybe you did a 20-minute class or an hour class, you were regulating your nervous system the entire time. And so you come out just feeling like a weight was lifted. And who doesn't want that? you
Right.
know?
No, I mean that's what we would be something that we want to achieve. I think that's something that we try to achieve that using things that don't won't ever give us those results. We want to reduce stress, so we'll have a drink, we'll have a cocktail. Like we want wait, stop. What are we doing? Okay, you're getting shit faced. That's not reduce that's having the opposite effect that you would like to, right?
Yeah,
Um,
and I think we talked about this, prior to this call, but I think that is the path of least resistance,
yeah,
right? Like
yeah,
that's the thing that's like easy. It's like, yeah, let's have a drink. Like let's forget about it. Let's not deal with the things that we need to deal with. And I'm guilty of these things too. So it's not
right.
a space of judgment. It's a
Nope.
space of like relatability. Like I totally get it. Like I get the want to do that, to not deal with it and to drink. And but then what happens, it's like this vicious cycle because then you wake up the next day and you have even more anxiety and
Well,
stress and
yeah,
you
and
feel like
physically,
shit.
you've dehydrated your body. You've done all these things that are going to take an entire day to recover from.
Yep, you
Um,
increased your inflammation
yes.
dramatically and your body doesn't, for I think it's, I saw this recently and I think it's 24 hours. Your body doesn't like your lost for words. Give me 1 second.
Take your time.
Um, your metabolism, right? So it stops. Your body doesn't process anything that you eat or drink for 24 hours after drinking alcohol. And so it's, you know, so detrimental
It
on our,
undermines anything that you were doing positive that the day or two before.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But
What
I
if
get
we
it. I mean, trust me, I get it.
what if we could get to a place, right? Think about this. This just made me think. What if we could get to a place where if we experience an incident the way we coped with it was to go exercise or take a yoga class or sit and be calm and listen to our breath. And what if that became like the acceptable preferred way for you to address an issue or a problem?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that would be profound. Have you heard the expression, the only way out is in?
Yes.
So I think that that applies to
Yeah.
this conversation. The only way that you're going to process and be able to detach, and I'm not saying that you're going to be able to forget something, you know, the things that happen to us, and those things
Sure.
are always going to be there. But we can control, or we can start to take steps to um, detach the emotional attachment that we have to those things.
Yeah.
And so the only way that we do that is by going in.
Yeah.
All the outward stuff, the alcohol, the TV, the, you know, the escaping, the numbing, those are distractions. And then that wound, and I'll say wound, or that event, or whatever it is that you're dealing with, festers. And then we, you know, down the road, it's what we talked about before. It's like now it's that landslide, and you're like, I didn't deal with this initially, and it festered over time, and now it's this huge thing that I have to deal with. You know, and there are measures that people take that are, you know, unhealthy, or, you know, there's a breakdown or whatever it is. And
Right.
so the only way out is in. The only way that we can grow from these things and thrive and learn from these things is to dive in and start to, you know, utilize the tools that we have that are, you know, to our advantage to heal from it. So I would love for that to be the normal thing, where it's like, okay, I just went through this really crazy thing, this really hard thing, this traumatic thing, this stressful thing, and I want to drink or I want to escape, but I'm not going to do that.
Right.
I'm going to meditate, or I'm going to go exercise, or I'm going to go see my peer support team or my therapist, or whatever it is that you know, gravitate towards
Sure.
to attack this now, you know.
Yeah. I think so. I think, we've created like PTS, like people hate when I say this. It's bullshit. And this is what I mean. The garbage man doesn't complain that the back of the truck smells like shit. Like that's his job. And so when he gets home, he doesn't walk in the house wearing the clothes he was wearing, picking up people's shit all day. He doesn't. He takes the stuff off, he rinses off, he cleans up, he mitigates those things before he goes into his house because he knows that that's on him,
Mhm.
literally and physically on him, right? Well, we're first responders. People don't call us on their best day, they call us on their worst. We are exposed to, not always, let's not be melodramatic. There are plenty of times where you get paid for what you're expected to do, not what you actually do, right? And so there are going to be times when we have to do really sad, horrible, unimaginable things. We know that. Like we know that that's part of the job. So why don't we on the front end start, like we said before, proactively implementing these tools that we know we're going to need to use during the entirety of our lives and career? Um, we manifest PTS, not the event. Like the event's the event, it's going to happen. So the PTS manifests itself when we don't take proactive, positive steps to diffuse and mitigate the event. When we drink, when we don't address, when we do other unhealthy things that delay us dealing with the issue, that forms the PTS. So, like, we're the source of it. It's not the, does that make sense?
That makes sense. Yeah. I've never heard it explained like that, but I love it.
And listen, I'm a moron, but that's my take on it. It's just like we've got to be careful, because when we start talking about PTS, you're almost like we have a little victims club here. Everybody's in the PTS victims club, and I gotta go, no. See, this is a club that you've made. You don't need to make a PTS victim survivor club, because you don't need to have it to begin with. We're all going to see and do really shitty things. It's going to suck. I know that. So, what am I doing for myself to make sure that I can implement real tools and tactics to make sure that I don't become that sad sack that is wallowing and spiraling because they didn't proactively and aggressively deal with the event? So, the culture of our profession has always said, this is the way you deal with it. You drink till you're fucking blind. And then if that doesn't work, there's always prescription meds. We don't want you doing coke or heroin because that's going to jam you up. But as long as you got a prescription, you're okay. And you know what? We'll pump your body full of oxy because of that back injury that you had. And we'll add a highball on top of it. And then we'll talk to you tomorrow. Lights out. That's an accepted form of dealing with stress in this profession. And everybody's wondering why, we're losing our minds. We've got to change the way we look at self-care. And, when we have a brother or sister that dies in the line of duty, and we go to the memorial every year in DC, you know how we honor them, Paige? Everybody gets shit-faced.
Yeah.
That's how we honor your service. And it's shameful, and it's time. Listen, when you didn't know that there was a better way, you just went along with the herd, man. But we're smarter than that now. We know that this is the way to truly add value, experience, and not only honor your life, while you're here. Like, do something that matters. And I think that this is a serious component of that allows you to really empower yourself to tackle and address all these things potentially that could derail you.
Yep.
You got me all jacked up now. You got
That's
me all.
okay. No, I love it. And I'm 100% on board with you. And I think it just circles back to everything we've talked about. Proactive measures. I do think that, like you said, historically, rub dirt on it and it'll be okay, or numb, or do these things. But
Yeah.
now health and wellness is a focus. And so there really aren't any excuses moving forward. I think that we're in actually a really exciting time, because I do think that everyone is waking up a little bit and they're saying, okay, these are the issues that we see. This is how we've done it in the past, and this is not working.
Right.
And what can we do to set up not just current law enforcement, but also set up future generations for success? And, like we said in the beginning, and I laugh about this, but like I've been laughed out of a lot of rooms. I've heard it all.
Yeah, right.
I've been doing this for a while, and 6 years ago, yoga was not a thing for the majority. I know, and I've had meetings with agencies in the past where they're like, we've been doing this since the 80s or the 90s, which is so rare. For the
Right. I
most
was going to
part,
say, yeah, right.
like I've if I didn't have thick skin and if I didn't believe in what I was doing, I would have left a long time
Yeah, you
ago,
would have
because
closed
it's,
up shop a long
yeah,
time ago, kid.
yeah. And I think now it's really exciting because I work with agencies across the country who are seeing the value in yoga as a tool, and it's just one of many tools. And I think that when it comes to health and wellness, it can be really daunting, and I think a lot of people think that they have to do it all. And the reality is that you don't have to do everything, but there's something for everyone. And when your agency, when your department can put together a robust wellness program that has different tools, then you have options, and you can reach for yoga if that resonates with you.
Right.
And you don't know, and we talked about this before too, you don't know if it resonates with you if you've never tried it.
Right. Yeah,
And
I mean,
so, try everything, have your little charcuterie board of like wellness tools and like sample everything and then decide, what works for you. And, how can you set yourself up for the future? And that's not just, um, it's not just a selfish thing. Because the way that you handle your body and your mental and emotional health seeps into every other aspect of your life. This also impacts your relationships and that's with your family, with your peers. And so how can you set yourself up so that you're showing up for other people in a really positive way too? So I'll stop there. I'll digress.
no, I think, listen, no, because again, it's why we don't need to wait, right? We don't need to wait to hit the wall. This can be something that, we can get proactive with, and we can start incorporating when things are good. Things are good. We don't, there doesn't need to be this all this calamity and bullshit going on. We can actually make a decision to incorporate these things right now. Just because it's Friday. I'm gonna, you know what? I'm gonna start, gonna do my research, and then I'm gonna sign up for a class. Um, we talked about the physical, the emotional, the breath work. Is there anything that you want to talk about a little more that you don't think we gave?
Yeah, so the three buckets, we have the
Yeah,
physical, we talked about that mobility, stability,
yeah,
flexibility, um, muscle recovery, injury prevention. And then you have the mental and emotional aspects of it.
yeah.
And really at the core, that is regulating your nervous system. It's all about the nervous system, right?
Talk to me.
So what happens when you have prolonged stress, chronic stress, heightened stress? And we know that this is something that happens in this profession,
Sure.
right? It's stressful. And like you said, maybe it's not all the time, but what happens is when you exist in that space all the time, your body will revert to that, right? And so when you have chronic stress, you're always in this heightened state, which is, what everyone knows to be the fight or flight,
Right. That
right?
hypervigilance
Exactly.
space.
When we're in fight or flight all the time, your cortisol levels, which is your stress hormone, that's always up. We talked about inflammation being up, heart rate is up. And so that has over time detrimental health issues.
Causes
Um,
a lot of heart issues, doesn't it, Paige?
Heart issues, like I said, inflammation, which causes a number of issues. And now I'm like at a loss. Sorry. Um, so when we have the chronic stress all the time,
Yeah.
adrenal fatigue, that was the other
Oh,
thing.
okay.
And so the idea is that we want to be in a state of rest and digest, right? We want to be in a level state for the majority of the time. And I think that a lot of times when we talk about fight or flight, everyone thinks of it as something that's really bad. And fight or flight is not bad necessarily.
Right.
It's actually really good. It's your
Keeps us
body's,
alive, doesn't it?
it keeps you alive. It's your body's natural response to a threat, right? What are you going to do? And we also know that, it's not just fight or flight, it's fight, flight, or freeze.
Yeah.
Those are the three responses to something, really stressful. And so it's important to have that because, we can relate this to law enforcement, or a common thing that we say is like, if you're in the woods with a bear, are you gonna, but you could say with a threat, whatever it is, are you gonna fight it? Are you gonna run away from it? Or are you gonna freeze? Right. And so having that when there's a threat is valuable.
Mhm.
Like you said, keeps you alive. The issue lies is when we're always in this state of fight or flight. And then again, like we said, it has all these detrimental health
When
issues
there's no threat present.
when there's no threat. So we're
Right.
always, in this state. So the idea is regulating the nervous system so that you're in a space of safety, a space of rest and digest. And the fight or flight only turns on when it needs to. And so we're kind of reprogramming the body if you're used to being in this heightened state all the time. And so yoga at its core, as we said before, is a breathing exercise, and it regulates the nervous system. And that's what it's all about, is how do we regulate the nervous system, and see cortisol levels go down, see your heart rate go down, inflammation goes down. And from there, like we said before, productivity goes up, mood goes up, you have this space of presence. And so, kind of thinking of it from that perspective, I think you can relate to that of like, okay, I need to learn on a day-to-day basis how to regain control over my nervous system. And when you can control, and that's the breath. So
Yep.
when we can control the breath, when we can regulate, we can extend and prolong the breath in a controlled and intentional way, then we can learn to control the mind. The mind is always going busy, and wants to think about things and is distracted. So we can control the breath, we can control the mind. When we can control the mind, we can control our actions and our reactions to things. And so they're all interconnected. Control the breath, control the mind, control your actions and reactions. And so, it doesn't have to be something, because everyone's busy. And that's the thing too. Like, I really like to take this modern approach, and I understand we all have things going on. We all have careers, we have families, we have hobbies, we have all these things going on. And sometimes it feels impossible to add anything new into your routine, especially when you're like, oh my gosh, if I don't do yoga, I'm going to die. And that's not it.
Yes, that's the message. That's the
not the
message we're
message,
sending right now.
or you have to practice yoga every single day or else,
of course.
I want this to be something that's very attainable, very approachable. And if you do a 5-minute breathing exercise when you need it, every once in a while, maybe you start your day 5 minutes, regulate your nervous system, set yourself up for success for the day. Maybe you do one yoga class a week, and maybe that's 20 minutes.
Right.
And you can do that once a week. And then if you decide that that's something that you want to continue doing, then maybe you expand and you do 2 or 3 times a week, which is kind of the ideal sweet spot.
We need to be intentional in scheduling this time for ourselves.
Yeah, and that's challenging. I mean, I get it. Like, I'm guilty of it too. It's like, I need to be better at time management. I need to be better about scheduling things, but every habit takes time to build, and so starting off realistic and easy, like, let's just start with once a week, do a breathing exercise or a physical yoga class once a week, and then go from there, get that to be like a part of your routine. And then go from there, maybe then you decide that you want to do 2 or 3 times a week, and then that's great too. And you're going to get the most benefit if you do 2 or 3 times a week. So that's kind of the message I like to relay, is like, let's take a modern approach. It doesn't have to be so overwhelming, but, at its core, regulating the nervous system is going to be the most powerful thing.
Been taking notes, Paige. I've always found, and I talked about this with Patrick the other day, you've got to put it on the calendar. Like, I'm going to say, if this is what I'm doing, just so you know, I'm going to schedule something like when we get off this call. I'm not going to, I'll have time tomorrow. No, I'm going to, you see, if we're not present and like committing to it right now, then it doesn't get done.
Yeah, and I'll even like put this out there too, like, reach out to me.
Yeah.
I don't have anything set up for individual use, and obviously we can talk about like my business and Firstgevity and
we're going to do that. Yeah.
But I'm happy to send a class. Like, if you're like, I want to get started now, what can I do? I'm happy to send a free class.
Yeah.
Reach out to me, or reach out to you, and ask for it. Like, I can send that to you, and you can send that to anyone you want. I wanted to put what I'm saying into action and to show you, like, yeah, here's a resource. You have no excuse now. It's not like I don't know where to find it. There's nothing that's catered to first responders, because
I don't have the money.
Guess what?
Boom.
Here you go. Yeah,
Yeah.
mic drop.
Excuses gone.
Yeah.
Oh my,
So
that's awesome. Well, we're gonna, when we get there, we're gonna put all that information out, and that's awesome for
yeah.
you to even suggest that. That's great. Um, spiritually, Paige, this is the, and listen, you know what? I'm gonna say this. I think this component is so spiritually doesn't mean Catholicism
Right.
or Judaism or spiritually. There's a component to yoga. Tell me about this, because I think that this is not. This can be something that I think is depleted in our lives. That I think is something we need to get back to. You know, talking about going back in, and so before I butcher this anymore, Paige, can you save me here?
No, no, I appreciate it, and I completely agree with you. I think, especially when it comes to teaching first responders, it's spirituality isn't something I touch a lot on. Um, I really try to, like I said, kind of tackle the things that are tangible that like make sense
Sure.
logically, because I think that that's the way that it's going to be received. So it's not something I usually talk about.
Right.
But you hear it a lot, with yoga. It's mind, body, spirit, and I think that it's so individual. Spirituality is so personal and so individual. I think that the best way and the simplest way I can explain and in what yoga tries to accomplish is peace. I think that
Peace.
that peace, it's,
Yeah.
feeling at peace. A lot of times yoga, people will say like, one with the universe, or things like that, that I think kind of get a little far out there. But I think that at its core, if you can find internal peace, then that's like that spirituality component that you're trying to accomplish. How can we get to the point where we feel completely okay and at peace with where we are in this moment? That's that spirituality component to it. So I'll kind of end it there, but I think
Can
that if we
can
could
I
just say
can I
peaceful.
can I double down on that for a
Yeah,
second?
of course.
When you said that, I when I present Paige, I talk about the serenity prayer, and that's peace. God
Yep,
grant me the
surrender.
serenity to accept the things I cannot change,
Mhm.
the courage to change the things that I can, right? I'm going to go after it. I'm going to be a part of my own solution, and the wisdom to know the
Know the
difference.
difference.
Yeah, that's peace. And I think that that ties perfectly in with what the first responder needs to hear, and that's what they need to know about the spirituality piece of yoga. Is it's the serenity prayer put into action
Yep.
for your mind, body, and soul. um no, not foo not crazy, not, I think when we make it tangible, you know make the un intangible tangible. I think people can, they can operate with knowledge in that space now. That listen, man, this has been awesome. I've got,
I feel like
Paige,
we're so in line.
I've got notes here, man. I've
Love
been
it.
it's really, you've really kind of like lifted the curtain behind what it is and what it's not. And it's you're almost a dumbass if you don't try it. I mean, there's so many benefits across the board for you. And it's not only you, like, so when you make you better, you make your relationships with everything that you touch becomes better instead of toxic. Right now, everything you touch, you fuck up. It's terrible. But when you start incorporating positive things in your life, things that make you a better version of you, then the things that you touch, they become beautiful. And I know that was corny, but I think
No, I
that's
love it.
true. I
And
think that's true.
I think too, like, we talked about this before. I think that knowledge and information is the best way to break stigmas. And so it's not so foreign, right? You're like, okay, like this makes sense. But it also takes people like you, or other members of leadership, or who have platforms like this, who are saying like, hey, like I do this, and it's when your peers and people you look up to are practicing what they're preaching, or like
Right.
they're the ones, so many times I've been into like a department and they're like, chief does yoga. They're like, so then I started doing yoga,
Right.
because they look
Right.
at chief and they're like, well, chief isn't feminine or woo woo or hippy
Right.
dippy at all. Like, I respect this person. This person's a leader. This person's someone who I strive to be,
Right.
and they're doing these things. They're setting the example for me. So I'm going to then prioritize and do these things. And so I think that it's a domino effect. And like I said, I think right now is such a cool time, because I think that perception is shifting, and there's knowledge out there that shows the why and the how, and how that applies to you. And
Right.
but then you have these innovators and these leaders such as yourself, who are like, using their platforms and their status, if you will, to say like, hey, like, try it. And I'm not under any illusion that everyone's gonna love yoga,
Right.
because that is not realistic. It just like, not everyone's gonna do CrossFit. Like for
Right.
me, like
Not everybody picks up a weight.
I'm not a
More people
CrossFit
should.
person.
Yeah.
I'm not a CrossFit person. I'll never do CrossFit, but I do like HIIT, and I do like lifting in certain ways, and so, maybe it's like I don't like meditation, but I really enjoy breath work. And so I think that right now it's really up to people who have the platform, people who are leaders, to put their money where their mouth is, to
Yeah.
try these things, to set the example, to show that these things are okay, and to break the stigma on, health and wellness in general, not just yoga, but mental health and wellness. I think there's still a
Sure.
stigma around it in general, talking to peer support, talking to therapists, those are still things that are stigmatized. And so, now's the time to kind of set that example and get that ball rolling,
Absolutely.
set up future generations, because then future generations are going to come in, and these resources are going to be things that have always been there. Like right
Wouldn't
now
that
we're
be
in
something?
we're in
Yeah.
this like crazy time, because you have this older generation that's like, rub dirt on it and like, suck it up, buttercup, and that's the like mentality, previously. And then you have like this group of leaders who are like, no, we're going to change this,
Right.
we're going to change the old ways, and we're going to set up these future generations for a better career and a longer career and a longer life after retirement. So when they come in and they have these resources, then they're like, we've always had yoga, like we've always had peer support, we've always had therapy, like that's so normal, and then they're going to
Right.
continue to prioritize that for future generations. So I think it's a really interesting and exciting time, and it's just a matter of time before yoga is in every single department across the country. Like, I
Yeah,
believe that.
I
So
believe that as well. I believe that. I think the key to that, and many other things, is vulnerability and sharing, and then when we do that, I mean, everybody wins. There's never a situation or an instance where your vulnerability and sharing of knowledge doesn't positively impact. It's just, and so
yeah.
we just need to become better at that. And that's what you're doing, man. You're doing some really amazing things. So talk to me about Firstgevity and you and your this initiative. You've been at it for 6 years. Um, you you're out in Arizona. You've got some great relationships with some PDs out there, but you also have a virtual program. So for that can reach around the world. So talk to me. Talk to me about Firstgevity and what you're doing there.
Yeah, so I've been teaching law enforcement for 6 years. My intro was teaching the recruits at Phoenix Regional Police Academy. So that was my very first introduction, was teaching at the academy.
Right.
It was, at the time, very much a volunteer type thing. And then through my years of working with them, I developed relationships. I was contracted through, I was actually contracted through DPS, because they shared the academy with Phoenix. And the virtual component was really at first a test. Like, it was kind of a question mark. Like, how do we provide 24/7 access to yoga resources for the recruits and staff members at the academy? So that was kind of how it all
Okay.
began. And so, kind of ran a pilot, if you will. And once we had proof of concept that it was utilized, that it was beneficial, that it was well received, then I started expanding and working with the various police departments in the Phoenix Metro, expanded to working with Tucson PD as well. And then I expanded to working with fire departments in addition. So first it was all law enforcement, and then I started working with various fire departments as well. And the whole idea is, like I mentioned, it's 24/7 access to virtual yoga resources. Because the challenging part, and I do work in person with some local agencies still, but the
I saw
challenging
you were out with Mesa
with
PD.
Mesa,
Yeah.
yep. But the challenging part is shift work, and so when we have in-person instruction, although it is very valuable, it's hard to, you're really only catering to a small percentage who are available that day, that time.
Sure.
So I, met with hundreds of departments by this point, and taking feedback as to what would be beneficial, what would be useful, and I built out the virtual course based on feedback from them. So it's very much made for first responders, with first responders, and it has a combination of everything: breath work, meditation, challenging physical classes, yoga classes for stress reduction. So it's like a full, comprehensive course. And yes, so now I work with, departments across the country. I'm not just solely in Arizona anymore. And so I've been really
That's
lucky.
awesome. Congratulations. That's great.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And, and it's really a testament to, like I said, the leaders at those departments who are innovators, who are forward thinkers, who are saying, hey, like, this is a valuable resource, and we're going to invest in our employees' health and wellness and their long-term health and wellness. And so, the name Firstgevity is longevity for first responders. So Firstgevity, and the idea is, everything we talked about: physical, mental, and emotional longevity. And that's longevity in your career, but also life after retirement. How do we set you up for success?
100%.
And so, yeah, so the way it's set up is, departments, it's not for individual use. So the agencies are investing in their employees' health and wellness, and they're rolling this out as a piece of their health and wellness programming.
Excellent. Excellent. And so, somebody wants to get in touch with you, an agency leader, somebody running their training division, their wellness division. I'm going to put all the information in the show notes, but put that out for us now, Paige, if you would. How do we get in touch with you?
Super simple. I mean, I think it's super simple. My website is firstgevity.com. My email is paige@firstgevity.com. My LinkedIn, Paige Arnone. So really any platform, email me, reach out on LinkedIn. You can book a call, or reach out to me through my website directly, so you can kind of see what it's all about. But yeah, I mean, just reaching out. We have, a call to see if it'd be a good fit, and then we go from there.
That's awesome. Do you one final word for the listener now that we know how to get in touch with you and where to find you, and you've dispelled all the myths about yoga, and you've really clarified for us what the really the benefits across all spectrums are. One last thing you'd like to tell the listener before we wrap it up?
Man, you're putting me on the
Thanks for putting
spot.
you on. I was gonna say, yeah, that's what I do. It's what I do. It doesn't have to be anything super profound. It would just, if there's anything you'd like to say before we close it out.
I don't think so. I think that if someone has made it this far in the podcast and they're still listening, just thank you so much for your time and your attention. I appreciate it so much. And I think that we just, we all have an opportunity right now to make a positive change in our lives, but also in the first responder community. So yeah, that's about it.
I love it. Ladies and gentlemen, Paige Arnone, thank you so much for your time. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.